Today on The Family Answer Man, we're answering your questions about how narcissistic women and codependent men interact with each other in marriage from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orgis, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man himself. Now, our time is designed to answer questions commonly asked in both the counseling and church settings. And our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Now, we want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show of The Family Answer Man. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. And Days Smokehouse is located at 35770 LA Highway 16 in Denham Springs. Now, this show is not a therapy session, and it is not specific advice to your situation. Mental health is a very serious issue, and family dynamics can be and often are very complicated. So, for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. But we hope that this episode of The Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Well, Dr. Mark, we're talking about a topic today that for a long time was not talked about at all.
Yes.
And it seems like maybe has been talked about a little bit more in the world that we live in. This conflict, is this like other conflicts that married couples deal with, or is this unique?
Yeah, well, see, narcissism is a personality disorder. And so the reality is that both males and females, men and women, both are subject to this personality disorder. As you said before in previous programs, personality disorders are generally something that is inherited for the most part, and something that is also learned in the environment. So you have this personality that is now developed due to genetics and due to environment. And so, again, does it matter if you're male or female? Both are subject to this. What begins to happen is that most narcissism is primarily noted in men, however. The ego and the egocentric life and the world, revolves around me, and it's all about me, and I'm the best, and I'm the most important, and I'm the most aggressive in the bunch, and all of this. And so we generally see this in men, but women also too can have this same personality problem or disorder or tendency. And so what begins to happen is, what happens when the wife is the narcissist? What happens when the wife begins to be the one who feels superior? Nothing's ever right. The world revolves around her. What kind of man is she going to marry? What kind of person is she going to embrace? What kind of person is she going to find attractive? And so when the narcissistic woman gets involved with what we call the codependent male, there's a unique dynamic that begins to happen. Years ago, back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, I'm sure even before then, but the word henpecked was the word you heard often.
Okay.
The henpecked husband and the henpecked father or whatever. And so that was the word that was used. Of course, it's advanced since then, as the narcissistic, wife, female in this case, begins to say things and do things that are basically non-flattering to the husband, or things that are considered even disrespectful, things that are considered annoying and problematic, things that are considered embarrassing. She embarrasses him, in public gatherings and settings and reunions, what have you, by, again, saying things that are demeaning, never taking his side, etc. And so, again, some would even say this is a mild form even of abuse even. And so, but we, in most cases, don't hear of the wife being the abuser or the wife being the one who is the narcissist. We generally hear this as the male.
Right.
But it does happen. And again, I think in today's question, we're going to unpack that a little bit as to what is going on and how often does this happen, and what happens when it does happen, and what to look for in this particular dynamic where you have a narcissistic woman and a codependent male.
Is this an example of the classic opposites attract, narcissism and codependent?
Oh, yes, of course. And we've talked about this in other segments as well, where you have the antisocial personality disorder, or what we used to call the psychopath, and the codependent woman. There's this sense of, I notice this about you, and I notice that you will tolerate, my behavior. You'll tolerate my lack of empathy. You'll tolerate my lack of remorse when I do something, egregious. And so what begins to happen is that when you find someone who is willing to tolerate all these things, you find that attractive.
Yeah.
Whereas a person who doesn't tolerate that,
they're not attractive to you.
They're not attractive, and they're going to stay around very long.
All right. Well, that leads us to our first question for the Family Answer Man today. If you have a question that you would like for us to answer, we can do that. You can email us at familyanswerman@liveoak.church, familyanswerman@liveoak.church. We love hearing from you guys, your encouragement, your words of inspiration, and, of course, your questions that we're able to answer for you. The question that was written in today says this. It says, both of my brothers married domineering wives. It's painful to see how they're treated at family gatherings, and I would almost call it abusive. Neither of them seem to be the same as I remember them. What causes this, and what can be done?
Well, again, first of all, as you said earlier, I believe it's important to note that certain personalities are attracted to other types of personalities. As we said earlier, sometimes the antisocial personality, or what we used to call the psychopath, because they show no remorse, because they are very abusive, etc., they will attract a codependent person. Why? Because the codependent person will often tolerate the abuse, or they'll often tolerate the neglect, with the hope that their patience or their love or their willingness to stay will somehow grant them the approval from the psychopath, or give them the purpose they need to make someone better, or even thinking that they're going to change the person who is the psychopathic individual. And so, again, it's very similar here in this particular question, where you have what we call the nice guy, or the codependent guy, who, again, falls in love with the narcissistic female, or vice versa. And so here are some traits, by the way, when we talk about the nice guy, or the codependent male, if you will. Here are some of the traits that they will bring into the relationship. Many times they believe, number one, that in agreeing or saying yes to their spouse is the best way to stay in a relationship. So what they will do is they'll say yes all the time, because they feel like if I say yes, then I will be tolerated, I will be welcomed, I will be even loved in this relationship. However, when that happens, you're now starting to diminish your identity. Yeah. When you say yes to everything, or in some cases, your wants and needs are often neglected. Right. Because you're saying yes to everyone, especially your wife. And when that happens, you start feeling empty. You start feeling isolated. You start feeling, again, alone. When you're saying yes to everything that your wife says or wants.
Yeah, and those aren't good places to be, empty, isolated, alone.
Exactly. And sometimes you can feel disconnected. But the nice guy, or the codependent guy, will sometimes say yes, thinking that that will keep the relationship strong and alive. Secondly, again, the reason for that, number two, is that they have a fear of conflict. Okay. Somewhere in their life, maybe as a child or a teenager or whenever, maybe they saw a lot of conflict in their own home between their mom and dad or whomever. Maybe they went through a very terrible divorce, watching their parents divorce. That was very painful and very maybe even abusive. And so the fear of that happening to them, so this fear of conflict now begins to take over. And so they will say yes just to avoid any sense of conflict. Number three, most nice guys, if you will, or codependent males, they've never created boundaries. And because they've never created any real boundaries, it's allowed other people, especially their spouse, to take advantage of them. They never said, don't cross this line, or this is where I draw the line, if you will. I'm not going to tolerate this particular behavior, this particular abuse, or this particular name that you're calling me.
Right, which is appropriate for everyone to have boundaries that we put in place. Things that keep us from feeling uncomfortable, keep us from feeling threatened, from
being abused. Right. Exactly. So the nice guy, unfortunately, the codependent male, sometimes do not have very strong boundaries. Fourthly, for those who are keeping count, some don't realize that sometimes conflict avoidance is worse than conflict. Right. So for the nice guy, they just have this mindset that, again, if I avoid conflict, we'll be fine. But sometimes conflict avoidance is worse than conflict. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are certain things that you need to let go. Right. There are certain things that you need not respond to. There are certain accusations or certain words or certain statements that you need to just let go and move on. But in some cases, there are certain things that need to be addressed. Even though it may be a problem, even though it may be painful, even though it may be awkward, there are some situations that you cannot let go any longer. And so sometimes conflict is more important than conflict avoidance. Yeah. Next, number 5, some believe that being nice and agreeable prevents rejection. One of the great fears of most men is the feeling of rejection. And so for the nice guy or for the codependent guy, they believe that if I'm nice, if I'm agreeable, if I say yes, if I go along, then hopefully I won't be rejected. Hopefully I will have my needs met. Next, number 6, this great fear of rejection often drives them into many areas of their life. I'll go the extra mile. I won't respond. I won't talk back. I won't argue. I won't disagree because I don't want to be rejected. And so this fear of rejection drives them. Maybe because they were rejected maybe as a kid or maybe as a young adult or a teenager, maybe that first marriage, they felt rejected. And so there's this great fear beyond the norm of rejection. Number 7, many nice guys lack personal confidence. Even though they may, be, in a good position financially, they may have a good job, they may have all of the amenities that you would want in most men. For some reason, they don't feel confident. And so they lack this personal confidence. And so therefore, they will say yes all the time. They will do what they're told, if you will. They will go the extra mile. Next, they make the mistake of confusing being assertive with being aggressive. A lot of men fear that, hey, if I show too much aggression, then I will, I'm being a bully. I'm being the man I don't want to be. But the reality is being assertive simply means expressing what you believe in, what you find is important. And so you can be assertive without being aggressive.
Yeah.
And here they, again, mistake and confuse those two. Next, most nice guys won't mention what is bothering them until they just explode.
Right, which is the danger.
Which is the danger. They won't say, that really hurt me, that really bothered me, that really concerns me. That they'll hold it in, they'll stuff it in, they'll keep it in until finally they can't control it or contain it any longer, and then they explode, and then it's not good for anyone. And last of all, number 10, most nice guys won't take the lead, fearing criticism or fearing being wrong. They won't make the final decision. They won't say, this is where we need to go, this is what we need to do, because they fear that if I make the wrong choice, if I make the wrong decision, then I will be rejected, I will be criticized, I'll be insulted. And so they just do not take the lead for that very reason. Now, the problem is this. The problem is the narcissistic woman sees this and finds it attractive.
Okay.
And the reason why is because she senses that this nice guy, this codependent guy, will make life all about her, which is, in many cases, the primary trait of the narcissist. Their image, life being about them, life revolving around them, having people in their life that say yes to them all the time, is basically what the narcissistic female or wife desires and wants. And so she sees this guy, he's a nice guy, and he is willing to tell her everything she wants to hear, never disagree, never say no, always there, always going the extra mile. The problem is, after the marriage, these problems are now noticeable both from the couple as well as those who are outside. That's why in this question, this sister is noticing that both of her brothers have very domineering women in their life. And basically what this sister is saying, if I'm hearing the question correctly, is that they're not the same person they used to be.
Right.
They've lost their identity. They've lost their sense of confidence. They've lost their sense of self-assurance. And so they're not the same brothers or guys that she remembers because they have these wives in their life who have now controlled them, dominated them, and put them in a position to where they're not who they once were.
So is that a common occurrence for someone that's codependent in a relationship with a narcissist? Is that they start to lose their sense of self?
Exactly. You lose your sense of who you are. You lose your sense of what's important to you. You lose your sense of what you want to become or the goals you want to obtain or the dreams that you want to dream. And so what happens is this. Here are some of the traits, if you will, as a narcissistic wife interacts with a codependent husband. This is what's generally noticed. Or here's some of the traits that we need to be mindful of as this couple is now interacting as husband and wife.
Okay.
Number one, what many have discovered is this. There is no pleasing the narcissistic wife, though the husband tries. But throughout their marriage, she is demanding, she is demeaning, and she is disappointed almost daily. And he experiences this. He experiences her demands. He experiences the demeaning words that she uses. And he also experiences her disappointment in him almost daily. So there is no pleasing the narcissistic wife.
It's pretty difficult.
It is very difficult because, what begins to happen is that you try and 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 you get nothing back.
Yeah.
It's the proverbial, waving the carrot in front of the horse. You go to it, but you never obtain it. Next, she rarely, if ever, takes the side of her husband. In other words, she takes the side of other people. If he comes home and says, "Oh, wow, the boss really had it in for me today," she would say, "Well, yeah, because you're lazy." And he's going, wait a minute. I worked very hard. Well, if you worked hard, the boss wouldn't have it in for you. Obviously, you're doing something wrong. And what he's wanting from her, of course, is some sympathy, some reassurance, hey, it's going to be okay. So she really takes his side, and generally takes the side of other people, especially maybe in his positions or his beliefs. He may say something about a particular politician, and she'll say, well, no, maybe you're the problem, not him. Maybe your views are wrong, not his, or whatever. Next, she often sees herself as being superior and smarter than her husband, and therefore he should be subservient. So she sees herself as being superior and smart, and she'll say that to other people. My husband, is just so obtuse, or my husband is just so inane, or my husband, if he had a brain, he'd take it out and play with it, kind of thing. And she sees herself being smarter and therefore superior, and she'll even say that to other people. He better do what I tell him, or else, or he doesn't want to, rub me the wrong way, that kind of thing. And so she sees her husband, therefore, as being subservient, as she is smarter and more superior. Fourthly, the narcissistic wife easily shifts blame for her mistakes onto the husband. Okay. So for example, if she overdrafts, the checkbook, or overdrafts, whatever, the checking account, instead of saying, "Oh my goodness, this was my mistake, I should have, balanced the checkbook, I should have, looked at the amount of money we had," she'll blame the husband. Well, if you had a better job, if you made more money, if you had put all the money in the account, if you would have got that raise, if you weren't so lazy, we'd have the money for me to do that. So actually, it's not my fault that I overdrafted. It's your fault that you don't make enough money. And so we start to see that with the narcissistic wife. She shifts the blame for her mistakes onto the husband. Number 5, she's always distant emotionally and physically. In other words, when she wants attention, you better be there to give it. But when the husband wants attention, she's always absent. So she's always distant, both emotionally and then physically. Next, the narcissistic wife will often prevent the husband from having family and friends that they can connect with. So what begins to happen is she begins to isolate him from maybe his siblings, or isolate him maybe from, some close friends. And I'm not saying these are bad friends or bad people or whatever, a bad influence. These are maybe in many cases good people, your family that you grew up with, good friends you went to college with, whatever. But she will refuse that he have any friends or family that's too close, for fear that she might lose him. For fear they may speak into his heart and mind that what is going on may not be healthy. Yeah. However, she will often flirt with other people. So when they go into a gathering of people, maybe some sort of dinner party or something along those lines, she'll be very flirtatious with those in the room.
So it's definitely a double standard.
Definitely a double standard. Number 7, she treats intimacy, therefore, as a bother, a chore, and a hassle. But in the beginning, she often love-bombed him. Means in the beginning, she showed lots of love and lots of attention, lots of affection, lots of flirtation. But once she married him, now she treats intimacy as a bother, a chore, and a hassle, and makes him feel, in many cases, as if he is a bother to her. And so that's something that is very common with the narcissistic wife. Number 8, she often threatens to leave him. She's constantly talking and declaring, hey, because you don't make enough money, or because you didn't cut the grass just right, or because you didn't take the time to clean up the kitchen, I'm going to leave you.
Yeah.
And so she has this thought and this mindset and these consistent threats of, if you don't measure up, I'm leaving you.
Which reinforces all the fears of the codependent, which keeps them stuck in the relationship.
Exactly. I'm not doing enough. I need to do enough. Obviously, I'm not, the man I need to be. Number 9, she does not remember special days. She forgets anniversaries. She forgets birthdays. Sometimes she may even forget, Christmas gifts. She'll get gifts for all the kids and gifts for all the other family members, but she doesn't get him anything. So she doesn't remember special days, birthdays, anniversaries, etc. And number 10, she'll often create conflict that will eventually punish the husband. So in other words, she has this consistent sense of, if you don't do what I want, if you don't agree with me, if you don't say yes to what I want, then I will eventually punish you. And as we said on this program before, there's 2 things that you don't do with your spouse or to your spouse. Number 1, you don't parent them. And number 2, you don't punish them. You punish an insubordinate child, perhaps. You punish maybe an insubordinate employee. You punish maybe a criminal, but you don't punish your spouse, nor do you parent them. And so here in this case, the narcissistic wife will often punish her husband or parent her husband in such a way that, again, he feels demoralized, demeaned. He feels as if that somehow the conflict that was created is his fault, and therefore he needs to be punished.
Yeah, and so going through this list and just hearing all these traits of a narcissistic wife, it could be easy if you're listening to say, oh, man, those things are they're made up examples. They're extreme. These are real things that really happen.
They really do happen. And most of our listening audience, if you think long and hard, you know these people. You've seen this played out. You've been at the church picnic. You've been at the church fellowship. You have been at the board meeting. You have seen this played out.
Right.
You've been at the family reunions. You have seen this play. Just like this sister of these 2 brothers in this question. Yeah. She says, I have seen this. We're in family gatherings, and I see how painful it is how my brothers are being treated by their wives.
It's the whipped puppy.
Exactly. And so what begins to happen is that it becomes noticeable. It becomes problematic. Even the kids sometimes will notice it. As the kids get older, they'll say things like, Dad, why do you let Mom talk to you that way? Or Dad, why does you let Mom treat you that way? Or Dad, it wasn't your fault. She just went off on you, or whatever. And so even the children that are now adolescents or even young adults begin to see this playing out. So the question is, what can be done? What can be done? And that's the $6 million question, now which there is an easy answer. But there really isn't. But there are a few things we need to be mindful of. Number 1 is this. One of the first principles that I often share with people is that we train people how they can treat us.
Say that again.
We train people how they can treat us. Ooh. And so we need to be mindful of that. If you want someone to treat you with respect, you have to train them. Maybe there's certain things that you will not tolerate, certain things that you will not do, certain things that you will not embrace, certain places you will not go. And so you begin to train people how they can treat you. And so this is true of all of us, and in every setting. I've said to pastors, and for the pastors who are listening out there, in many ways, pastors, you train, your deacons, you train, your board members, you train your congregation how they can treat you. Yeah. And if you don't, then there are people on that board, people who are among those deacons, people who are in that congregation that will start treating you in a very abusive sort of way.
Right. And this is every relationship. This goes for parents to children, how you let your kids talk to you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's with friendships. It's at work. This is across the board.
Years ago, quick little sidebar, I had a friend of mine who was a teacher, and this teacher basically said that, as they were training, helping other teachers, that she comes across, in many cases, very stern in the very beginning. Because a lot of teachers want to come across very sweet and nice, which I understand.
Which kids to like you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what happens is that in many cases, unfortunately, the very sweet and nice teacher on the first day of school tries to turn into the stern teacher at the end of the school year, and it doesn't work out very well. Yeah. But she said, if you flip it, if you come across very stern and very strict in the beginning, then you can lighten up as they begin to understand what you will and will not tolerate. Yeah. And so, again, the point is we train people how they can treat us. And that's very important. And that's important for both men and women in every relationship. Number 2, seek support from maybe a counselor. that as you go through this, to make sure that you understand that, you're not alone in this, that there are certain things that we need to be mindful of and careful of as you are in this relationship. And maybe, again, some things that you can do that would help you to create a healthier marriage with this very narcissistic person. So the counselor, sometimes good friends can help you. Sometimes the pastor can help you, give you the moral and scriptural and spiritual support that you need. But the main thing is, don't go through this alone.
Yeah.
If you find yourself feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling empty, don't stay in that very long, because eventually that will take a very unhealthy turn in your life. As we said, thirdly, marriage counseling sometimes needs to happen.
Yeah.
Not just individual counseling, but sometimes marriage counseling will sometimes help unpack what's going on, and maybe even help her see that what she is doing is going to eventually lead to disaster.
Yeah.
Because you cannot stay in this type of relationship for very long. Because we get married to have our needs met. Mm-hmm. And if your needs aren't being met, then eventually you'll become empty. And as the old proverb says, we said it before on this program, that when you are full, nothing can tempt you, but when you're empty, even garbage looks good.
Yeah. And a great point about marriage counseling too is, if you're in a relationship with a power imbalance, right? It's very difficult if you're on the side that you feel like you don't have a voice in that relationship to then assert that in a safe way. And sometimes being able to do that with an advocate in the room helps you start to practice that, where you can then translate that later at home. Exactly.
Having an advocate is very, very powerful, very important. And that's where the counselor comes in. Next, take some initiative and don't fear conflict. Sometimes you're going to have to say, no, we're not doing that. Or no, that's a bad idea. Or no, I don't think we can afford that. Or no, we can't go there. Or no, I don't want them coming over, or whatever it may be. Sometimes you're going to have to take some initiative and not fear the conflict. There may be some conflict. They may test to see whether or not you're going to break or bend. Next, take care of what you have control over. You have control over how you respond. You have control over how you address certain things. So again, be reminded that you have some control over who you are and what you will allow. Next, recognize who you're dealing with. There are some people who do not realize that these narcissistic traits are very real. And so recognize what these are about, what this personality is like, and then begin to respond accordingly. And last of all, let your voice be known. Let your voice be heard. I mean, you have a voice in this, and there's certain things you need to say, or certain things that you need to remind yourself of, certain things you remind them of concerning what's important to you. Yeah. And of course, as always pray. I mean, prayer is so powerful and so important. One prayer that will always be answered according to the Word of God is wisdom. When you pray for wisdom, the Word of God says God will grant you that wisdom. So pray for wisdom. Pray of how God will use you in this situation, how God will deliver you in this situation, how God will maybe even heal this situation. Because again, marriage is designed to be a healthy, happy relationship. And if we understand how it works, if we apply the principles, then we will have that healthy, happy relationship. But when it's, as you said earlier, so lopsided, so one-sided, it becomes very difficult and very destructive. So pray for wisdom and see what God does.
Well, there you have it, the traits of a narcissistic wife and how a husband can deal with those things and adjust and make some changes. We want to thank you again today for joining us, and again for the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. And as a reminder, this is not a therapy session. We're not able to give specific advice to your situation, but we do believe in the power of mental health and of prayer, and we want to encourage you to find someone that can be there for you, someone that can answer your questions and walk this path with you. We hope that this episode of The Family Answer Man will encourage you and will inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, happier family.